In the grand bureaucratic machine that was the Galactic Classification Bureau, very little stirred excitement among its employees. Their work cataloguing and categorizing planets across 17 sectors of the known universe was meticulous, methodical, and, most employees would reluctantly admit, after their third fermented beverage, monumentally boring. Planets fell into predictable categories with predictable features, and after the first few thousand, they all started to blend together in a cosmic soup of statistical averages. Which is why Chief Classifier Zixnara's antennae were practically vibrating with interest as she reviewed the latest data packet from observation probe XB3097, currently orbiting the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star in the unfashionable western spiral arm of the Milky Way. "This can't possibly be right," she muttered, her four eyes blinking in their distinctive, asynchronous pattern that colleagues recognized as her deep analysis mode. "Krill'Vex, come look at these readings." Her assistant, a methane-breathing entity resembling a cross between a jellyfish and a filing cabinet, hovered over to her workstation. "Something anomalous, Chief." The probe's initial classification for Sol 3 was Paradise Class, environmental factors all within optimal ranges, abundant water, diverse ecosystem, moderate radiation, the kind of planet vacation brushes are made of. She gestured at the screen with one of her upper appendages. "But look at these atmospheric readings." Krill'Vex extended a sensory filament toward the display. 21% oxygen? That can't be correct. The probe must be malfunctioning. That's what I thought. So I ran a remote diagnostic. The probe is functioning perfectly. The atmosphere of this planet is actually composed of more than 1/5 free oxygen. But that's... Krill'Vex's translucent body pulsed with the pale green light that indicated confusion. "That's highly combustible. One lightning strike would set the entire surface ablaze." "Precisely. And look at these gravity readings, 1.1 standard units. The atmospheric pressure, nearly double what most sentient species prefer. The temperature variations, from -50 to +50 degrees on the standard scale. The background radiation levels alone would require protective gear for 97% of Galactic Council species. So it's not a Paradise-class world at all. It's a Deathworld." Krill'Vex's color shifted to the blue-gray of bureaucratic satisfaction. A classification error caught was a classification error corrected, restoring order to the universe. "What class should we assign? Class 6? Perhaps Class 7 with those oxygen levels?"
"That's just it."
Zixnara's antennae quivered more intensely. The probe also detected clear signs of intelligent life. Tool use, artificial structures, energy emissions, atmospheric pollutants consistent with industrial civilization. According to all readings, this planet is inhabited by a technologically advanced species. "That's impossible," Krill'Vex stated flatly. "No known sentient species could evolve in such conditions, let alone build a civilization. The environmental pressures alone would..." "I know. And yet, there they are." Zixnara pulled up a visual feed from the probe, showing sprawling cities, transportation networks, and unmistakable evidence of a global technological civilization. "They call themselves humans, and they appear to find their environment not just tolerable, but pleasant." The classification committee room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Vrex Nil, the senior biological consultant, spoke up from his moisture tank in the corner. "We need to reclassify this planet immediately and send an observation team. If these humans have actually evolved to thrive in what should be lethal conditions, they represent either the most remarkable adaptation in galactic history or," he paused dramatically, his breathing apparatus bubbling, "or the most terrifying potential threat we've ever encountered." "Isn't that being a bit alarmist?" asked Zixnara. "They're just living on their homeworld. It's not like they evolved specifically to terrify us." "Any species that considers a highly combustible atmosphere normal is inherently terrifying," Vrex Nil countered. "What else might they consider normal that would liquefy the rest of us?" Krill'Vex's body had shifted to the mottled purple of bureaucratic concern, the color that preceded the filing of strongly worded reports. "The classification protocols are clear. We need boots on the ground, or whatever appendages our field researchers possess. Nara nodded, already composing the mission parameters in her mind. Approved. Let's send our best field classifier, someone adaptable, thorough, and, most importantly, expendable enough that no one will miss them if these humans turn out to be as dangerous as their planet. So, Krill'Vex then, suggested Trillpex. Precisely, Krill'Vex. Lead field classifier Krill'Vex had visited 47 planets in his career, from frozen methane wastelands to sulfuric acid swamps. He prided himself on his adaptability, his thorough methodology, and his unparalleled survival record. He was also, as his annual performance review consistently noted, insufferably smug about it, which made his current situation all the more satisfying to the colleagues who had monitored his emergency distress signal precisely 6 minutes after he disembarked from his cloaked landing craft in a region the locals called Nebraska. "The air is trying to kill me," Krill'Vex had screamed into his communication device. "It's everywhere. It burns. Why does their air burn?" After the initial panic subsided and Krill'Vex had adjusted his environmental suit to filter the caustic oxygen atmosphere, his reports became more coherent, but no less alarmed. This planet should be classified as a Class 9 Deathworld, possibly Class 10, he transmitted from the comparative safety of his landing craft. The initial assessment failed to account for numerous lethal factors that I have documented in the attached appendices A through Z, with special attention to Appendix Q, indigenous microorganisms that want to colonize my respiratory system. The Bureau had responded with their customary compassion. They demanded more specific data and reminded him that his research grant did not cover early evacuation due to atmospheric discomfort. And so Krill'Vex found himself lurking at the edges of human settlement, his environmental suit modified to resemble what humans called fashion, though he suspected his interpretation of their baggy jeans and oversized hoodie might not be entirely accurate, given the strange looks he received. He sat now on a structure humans called a bench in one of their recreational areas, a park, methodically documenting the myriad ways this planet was actively trying to murder every living thing upon it. Day 7 of observation, he dictated quietly into his recording device. The humans appear completely oblivious to the fact that they live in an environment that would be considered a high-security prison for violent offenders in any civilized system. Their atmospheric oxygen levels alone would require hazard pay for Galactic Council maintenance workers. Yet human juveniles intentionally hyperventilate this corrosive gas mixture for amusement. He gestured subtly toward a group of young humans who were breathing rapidly and then spinning in circles until they fell down, laughing. They refer to the crushing gravitational force of their planet as normal and have adapted by developing dense musculature and internal skeletal structures that would be considered militaristic biological enhancements in any council species. Their exposure to their star's radiation would qualify as deliberate torture under Convention 5529B. Yet they voluntarily increase this exposure in a practice they call tanning for purely aesthetic purposes. A human female walked past his bench, leading a quadrupedal predator on a thin restraint. The creature bared its teeth at Krill'Vex in what he could only interpret as a promise of imminent evisceration. The humans also domesticate carnivorous attack beasts as pets, which they assure each other are friendly despite clear evidence of evolved killing apparatus. The particularly sadistic humans even described these predators as rescued, suggesting some sort of gladiatorial acquisition system. The human smiled at him as she passed. "Cute outfit," she remarked. Krill'Vex froze, uncertain if he had been identified as an alien or merely insulted for his fashion choices. Either seemed equally terrifying. The native sentients have developed a complex system of verbal communication that includes numerous non-literal expressions, making it nearly impossible to determine their actual intentions, he continued once she was out of earshot. Their facial expressions often contradict their verbal content, suggesting either advanced deception capabilities or profound psychological dissociation from reality. His observations were interrupted by a deafening crack from the sky, followed by a torrential downpour of dihydrogen monoxide, a substance that, while not directly lethal to his species, was disruptive to his sensory membranes. The humans in the park reacted with mild annoyance, rather than the blind panic such an atmospheric event should trigger. Some produced portable shelter devices, umbrellas, while others simply allowed the liquid to impact their external surfaces without apparent concern for the countless microscopic organisms being transferred upon them. "They don't even fear their weather," Krill'Vex muttered incredulously as he huddled under the minimal protection of a vegetative structure. A planet where electrically charged atmosphere can strike without warning, where winds can reach destructive velocities, where frozen precipitation can immobilize entire regions, and they discuss it as casually as menu options. A human male suddenly appeared beside him under the tree, shaking excess water from his outer coverings. "Some storm, huh? They say we might even get hail later." Krill'Vex's translator had to process this statement twice. The human was expressing enthusiasm about the prospect of frozen projectiles falling from the sky. "That would be unfortunate," he managed to reply. "Nah, it's great," the human continued. "My car got totaled by hail last year. Insurance paid out more than that piece of junk was worth." He extended his manipulator appendage. "I'm Doug, by the way." He caught himself. "Christopher. I am being called Christopher." "You visiting from out of town? Your accent's pretty unique." "Yes, very distant geopolitical region. Much different from here, less gravity." Doug nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Well, welcome to Nebraska, man. If you think this weather's crazy, just wait until tornado season." Krill'Vex research had included tornadoes. The thought that humans categorize death vortex manifestations into recreational seasons made his internal organs shift uncomfortably. "I look forward to observing from very far distance," he replied. "Smart man." Doug clapped him on the shoulder with a force that nearly collapsed Krill'Vex's exoskeletal support structure. "Hey, a bunch of us are having a barbecue once this rain lets up. You should come by." His translator provided supplementary information. Barbecue. Ritual involving the combustion of organic matter and the deliberate charring of deceased animal tissue before consumption. "You are intentionally setting biological material on fire for purpose of ingestion?" Krill'Vex asked, unable to mask his horror. Doug laughed. "You sound like my vegan sister. Don't worry, we've got plant-based options too, though you haven't lived until you've tried my 5-alarm chili." The supplementary translation: a food preparation containing capsaicin compounds that simulate the sensation of thermal injury when consumed, did nothing to reduce Krill'Vex's growing certainty that humans were, in fact, the most terrifying species in the galaxy. "I must file reports," he stammered. "Perhaps another solar cycle." "Suit yourself, Christopher. Catch you around." As Doug sauntered away completely unbothered by the ongoing hydro-assault from the atmosphere, Krill'Vex activated his emergency transmitter. "Update to Galactic Classification Bureau. Urgent reclassification required. SO3 is not merely a death world. It is a Class 10 death world where the dominant species has evolved to not only survive, but to derive recreational enjoyment from conditions that would be used as execution methods in civilized systems. They expose themselves to radiation for aesthetic purposes. They intentionally consume substances that cause pain. They celebrate atmospheric violence. Request immediate extraction and posthumous recognition of my heroism when the psychological trauma of this assignment inevitably ends my life." The Bureau's response came 3 hours later. "Request denied. Continue observations. Of particular interest, how do the humans manage their clearly overwhelming evolutionary advantages when interacting with other species? Additional research budget approved for immersive cultural investigation." Krill'Vex stared at the response for a full minute before finally composing his reply. "I hate you all." The emergency session of the Galactic Classification Bureau's High Council was now in its 4th hour, and the temperature in the chamber had risen in direct proportion to the bureaucratic panic. "This cannot be right," insisted High Classifier Morbex, their eye stalks quivering with agitation. "Krill'Vex must be exaggerating. No sentient species could evolve on a world with these parameters." Zixanara displayed the latest data package on the central holographic projector. I've personally verified the readings. Sol 3, or Earth as the natives call it, has gravity 10% higher than galactic standard, oxygen levels that would be considered industrial hazards in most facilities, background radiation that exceeds safety protocols, atmospheric pressure that would require decompression therapy for 60% of council species, and temperature variations that range from instantly lethal to excruciatingly lethal depending on your biochemistry. And yet these humans not only survive but consider their world ideal? Asked a representative from the Evolutionary Biology Department. They call it a Goldilocks planet, Zixanara confirmed. According to their own scientific literature, it is just right for life. Just right for their life, corrected Vrexnil. What we're dealing with here is a species that evolved in conditions most of us would consider apocalyptic. Their baseline existence is our worst-case scenario. They must have developed extraordinary technology to survive, suggested another counselor. That's the truly disturbing part, Zixanara replied. They haven't. Their technological level is relatively modest. Atomic energy, basic space exploration, digital information systems, nothing that explains their survival. They've simply adapted biologically to conditions that should be impossible to adapt to. She played a video clip that Krill'Vex had recorded, humans voluntarily submerging themselves in a large body of dihydrogen monoxide, propelling themselves through it for recreation while partially exposing their bodies to direct stellar radiation. They call this going to the beach, she explained. It's considered a relaxing recreational activity. Relaxing? Sputtered Morbezel. They're exposing themselves to radiation, risking water inhalation, and subjecting their bodies to parasitic organisms simultaneously. For relaxation? According to Krill'Vex's latest psychological evaluation, humans appear to have evolved a response to danger that includes elements of attraction rather than pure aversion. They seek out experiences that include controlled risk. They refer to the deliberate elevation of stress hormones as an adrenaline rush, and consider it pleasurable. The council chamber fell silent as the implications of this settled over the assembled bureaucrats. So, what you're saying, Krill'Vex finally ventured, is that we've discovered a species that not only survives in conditions we consider lethal, but actively enjoys situations we would classify as torture. A species that evolved on a world of fire-air, crushing gravity, and random electrical discharges from the sky, and considers this paradise? Precisely, confirmed Zixanara. Well, said Morbex after a long pause, I believe we need a new classification category. Krill'Vex had not intended to participate in the human barbecue ritual. He had fully planned to remain in his survey craft, documenting his observations and periodically checking himself for signs of psychological breakdown. But the Bureau's insistence on immersive cultural investigation left him little choice, which is how he found himself in Doug's backyard, holding a container of fermented grain liquid, beer, and watching with scientific horror as humans deliberately exposed strips of deceased animal muscle to open flame before inserting these charred remains into their digestive orifices. So, Christopher, said Doug, wielding a metal tool to flip the sizzling flesh. What do you do for a living? I classify things, Krill'Vex replied truthfully. I determine which category different objects belong to. Like a taxonomist, asked a female human who had been introduced as Doug's sister with the weird diet. Similar, he agreed, relieved at finding a plausible cover. I study environments and their characteristics. All cool, an environmental scientist, Doug exclaimed. Maybe you can settle a debate we've been having. Is it better to live somewhere with seasons, or somewhere that's warm all year round? Krill'Vex blinked behind his human appearance holographic disguise. You prefer environments with unpredictable thermal variations, rather than stable conditions? Hell yeah, Doug replied, taking a swig of his beer. What's the point of living somewhere it's the same boring weather all the time? You need some variety. Some snow in the winter, thunderstorms in the spring, beach weather in the summer. Thunderstorms, Krill'Vex repeated weakly. The atmospheric electrical discharge events that can instantly terminate biological functions. Doug's sister laughed. You really are from out of town, aren't you? Nothing better than watching a good thunderstorm roll in over the plains. Nature's light show. Here, try this, Dag interrupted, handing Krill'Vex a plate containing a circular processed grain product, bun, containing the incinerated animal tissue, hamburger, along with various vegetation matter. Krill'Vex's culinary analysis system inside his environmental suit indicated the food would not be immediately lethal to his biology, though it advised against regular consumption. For the sake of his mission, he took what he hoped was a convincingly enthusiastic bite. The flavor sensors in his suited interface reported a complex chemical profile that his species had no cultural context for. It wasn't unpleasant, merely bizarre. Good, right? Doug prompted. Very interesting, Krill'Vex managed. The process of applying combustion to nutrients creates unique chemical compounds. That's one way of putting it, Doug's sister remarked dryly. Wait until he makes you try his famous 5-alarm chili. That stuff should be classified as a biohazard. Speaking of classification, said another human who had joined their conversation, did you guys hear about that weird government report about Earth being potentially habitable for alien life? It was all over the fringe science sites yesterday. Krill'Vex nearly expelled his recently consumed hamburger. What report? He asked with forced casualness. Some leaked document from some astronomy department saying that Earth falls into a rare category of exceptionally life-supporting planets that could be attractive to extraterrestrial visitors. The human made gestures with his digits to indicate quotation marks. Apparently, our combination of atmosphere, water, and gravity is like super special on a galactic scale. Krill'Vex recognized with horror that one of his preliminary reports must have reached human intelligence networks. The classification of Earth as Paradise Class had been the initial, catastrophically incorrect assessment. That sounds like inaccurate information, he suggested carefully. Surely this planet has many hazardous features that would deter visitors from other worlds. Doug laughed, flipping another slab of animal tissue on his cooking apparatus. What, like our nuclear weapons? Because otherwise Earth is pretty sweet. Perfect oxygen levels, comfortable gravity, beautiful scenery, amazing biodiversity. What's not to love? The constant threat of atmospheric electrical termination, Krill'Vex offered. Thunderstorms, Doug's sister smiled. Those are beautiful. The negative ions released during storms actually improve mood, plus the statistical chance of being struck by lightning is incredibly small. The fact that your planetary surface is 70% covered in a liquid that can fill your respiratory system and end your biological functions in minutes? You mean oceans? Doug looked confused. Dude, swimming is awesome, and we've got boats and stuff. No big deal. The lethal ambient radiation from your star. Sunlight? Doug's sister was definitely giving him strange looks now. We need that to live. Vitamin D, photosynthesis for plants, plus it feels amazing on your skin. Krill'Vex realized with growing existential dread that he was speaking to beings who had evolved to not merely tolerate, but require conditions that would kill most sentient species in the galaxy. Conditions they described as perfect and beautiful and amazing. The implications were terrifying. If humans ever developed advanced interstellar travel, they could colonize worlds that other species would require extensive terraforming and environmental suits to even visit briefly. They could establish outposts in radiation zones, high-gravity regions, and oxygen-rich atmospheres that would be considered industrial hazards to council species. They were, in effect, naturally armored biological tanks who perceived lethal environments as pleasant. I must submit a report, Krill'Vex said abruptly, standing from the outdoor seating apparatus. Thank you for the carbonized animal tissue. You mean the burger? Doug looked concerned. You sure you're okay, Christopher? You're acting a little weird. Completely normal human behavior from me, Krill'Vex insisted as he backed away. Enjoy your intentional proximity to combustion and consumption of pain-inducing capsaicin compounds. As he hurried back to his landing craft, Krill'Vex composed his most urgent transmission yet. Classification update. Sol 3 must be immediately reclassified as Class 10+, Deathworld Extreme, with the additional designation inhabited by biological aberrations who consider death conditions optimal. Recommend immediate diplomatic contact before humans develop interstellar capabilities and discover they can survive in environments we consider weapons grade. The first contact ceremony had not gone exactly as the Galactic Classification Bureau had planned. For one thing, the human representative seemed utterly baffled by the environmental suits worn by the alien delegation. "Wait, you're saying our air is toxic to you?" asked the human Secretary General, trying to wrap her mind around the concept. "But it's just air." "Your just air contains enough free oxygen to qualify as a combustion accelerant in most civilized systems," explained Ambassador Zixnayara through her translation device. "What you breathe would be used as industrial oxidizer in our worlds." "Aha," the Secretary General looked genuinely surprised. "And the gravity? That's a problem too?" "Your planet's gravitational pull requires our delegation to wear exoskeletal support systems to prevent compression injuries," confirmed Zixnayara. "What you consider normal would crush many species' circulatory systems." One of the human scientists leaned forward, fascination overriding diplomatic protocol. "So when you say Earth is classified as a... what was it again?" "A Class 10+ Deathworld," supplied Ambassador Zixnayara. "The highest classification on our standard scale, plus a special designation for worlds where conditions are so extreme that the evolution of sentient life was considered statistically impossible." The humans exchanged glances that the alien cultural specialists present identified as trying not to laugh. "I'm sorry," the Secretary General said, clearly making an effort to remain serious. "It's just, we've always thought of Earth as a perfect cradle for life. We actually refer to our position orbiting our sun as the Goldilocks zone, not too hot, not too cold, but just right. What is right for one species is cataclysmic for another," Zixnayara explained diplomatically. "Your biological adaptations to this environment are, quite frankly, remarkable. The fact that you consider it comfortable rather than merely survivable has profound implications for future interspecies relations." Another human, identified as a military advisor, narrowed his eyes slightly. "What kind of implications?" Krill'Vex, now serving as the Bureau's chief consultant on human biology, a punishment disguised as a promotion, stepped forward. "It means, simply put, that humans could potentially colonize worlds that other species consider uninhabitable, without requiring the extensive environmental modifications most colonization efforts demand. You are, from our perspective, naturally armored to withstand conditions we classify as disasters." The military advisor sat back, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Well, that's interesting. We do not share this information to alarm you," Zixnayara added quickly, noting the shift in human body language. "Rather, we see great potential for humans to assist in exploration and research in environments hostile to other Council species. Your natural resilience could be an invaluable asset to galactic science." "So you're saying we're basically space marines," one of the younger human delegates remarked, earning a stern look from the Secretary General, but appreciative chuckles from the military contingent. "I would not use that terminology officially," Zixnayara replied carefully, "but your biological adaptations do suggest certain advantages in challenging environments that could be beneficial in cooperative ventures." As the diplomatic discussions continued, Krill'Vex found himself standing next to Doug, who, as it turned out, was not merely a random human but a senior environmental adaptation specialist who had been covertly evaluating Krill'Vex throughout their interactions. "So," Doug said conversationally, "still want to try my 5-alarm chili, now that we're officially in diplomatic relations and all?" Krill'Vex's translator struggled with his reply, which contained concepts from his native language that had no human equivalent but roughly translated as, "I would rather bathe in stellar plasma while reciting poetry to a black hole." "Maybe we start with something milder," Doug suggested with a knowing smile. "Cultural exchange is a marathon, not a sprint." "A marathon being your ritual of unnecessary extended locomotion for recreation rather than survival," Krill'Vex noted. which perfectly exemplifies why your species terrifies mine. Doug laughed, clapping the alien on his environmentally protected shoulder. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Just wait until I introduce you to skydiving. Krill'Vex made a mental note to update the human entry in the Galactic Cyclopedia yet again. Under approach with caution, he would add, especially when they're being friendly. In the grand bureaucratic machine of the Galactic Classification Bureau, a new designation was created specifically for Earth, paradoxical Deathworld. A planet with conditions lethal to standard life forms, yet perceived as ideal by its native inhabitants, who have evolved terrifying resilience while maintaining a baffling obliviousness to their biological exceptionalism. As one classification bureau wag put it in an unofficial memo, "The joke's on us. We've been searching the galaxy for perfect worlds, while humans evolved on a death trap and convinced themselves it was paradise." And that perhaps explained humans better than any official classification ever could.